So, recording in progress. Hi, happy Sharktober. Thanks for joining. I'm David McGuire, the director and founder of Shark Stewards, and we're here to celebrate sharks and Sharktoberfest. Yay! So this is 15 years of events that we started in the Bay Area around shark conservation, and at the time it was to drive public support towards the first shark fin trade ban, which actually ended up being in Hawaii. We introduced it in California in advance of Hawaii, but there was a lot more support in Hawaii and a lot more resistance, particularly among the Chinese business community in San Francisco and Los Angeles, which we had to overcome with the Chinese community, among the Chinese and Pacific Island community. So trying to demonstrate that this is not a racial thing, it's not a cultural or ethnicity thing, it's about ocean sustainability and sheer economics. There's too much demand for not enough supply of sharks, and shark populations at the time were suffering and unfortunately still are, but there's still some hope. And there have been since that time, 15 years ago, 16 since we started Shark Stewards, almost 17. There have been a number of shark fin trade bans, other legislation in place to protect sharks. So we've got a number of team members on here. We're recording this for other team members here in California, Hawaii, overseas, in Southeast Asia, and hopefully the world will be motivated to celebrate sharks as well as protect them. So Shark Stewards works in education. We apply science towards advocacy and policy. Jim Toomey, who drew the strip Sherman the Shark, did us this little cartoon. You can see my my screen share. Yes, somebody give me a thumbs up. Gotcha.
It's
Okay,
cute.
great.
Yes,
Thanks.
it looks good.
Thank you. So Sherman the Shark was a syndicated column, kind of tongue-in-cheek, but he really got into the shark conservation movement on a strip, and he drew this for us at our first Sharktoberfest in at the National Marine Sanctuary. Unfortunately, that event had to be canceled by the sanctuary for lack of staffing, but we'll be back with them as our favorite partners to work in education as well as the White Shark Stewards program here in San Francisco and the Greater Farallones National Marine Sanctuary. So in lieu of that, we'll be doing a few other events, but it's never quite the same. It's fun to work with our NOAA partners. So I'm going to start out with a little video, and that it's a sort of a tease. And this is on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. And it's kind of a summary of what we do. It's just a short tease that was actually in a theater for an event that was set up for an awareness event in Newport Beach for our Run for Sharks. And it kind of just demonstrates some of the work we're doing more recently in Hawaii, working at CITES, protecting endangered species of sharks, still working in shark protection areas, reef protected areas, particularly in Southeast Asia, where this was shot, working overseas in Singapore and Malaysia to try to curb or intervene or interdict in the shark fin trade, where most of the shark fins are going, including Hong Kong, en route to China. So although we were able to do 14 states and finally the US, we still have a lot of ground or ocean that is to cover in marine conservation. And our goal is to keep sharks swimming in a healthy ocean, which is an intact ecosystem. So marine protected areas that encourage the fundamental core of the ecosystems, as well as the mesopredators, the herbivores like these tangs, and other wildlife, all the way up to apex predators. Yeah, pretty good. So a big part of our program is engaging youth, of course, and we have one youth, a couple, I hope, on the program here, and to educate and inspire them and motivate action. On meeting. That was a little summary that we did this summer with the footage I just happened to have in Hawaii. But now we're back in California and it's Sharktober. And we're here to celebrate sharks and to protect them, which was really a big goal of creating these events. We started a long time ago working in conservation work in California, protecting this charismatic species, Carcharodon carcharias, the great white shark, or as scientists or most of us call them white sharks because great is superfluous. They are grand, as a matter of fact. Like this pregnant female, they have been around for millions of years, perfectly adapted, doing just fine until humans came along and started killing them as bycatch, in some cases for meat, for their fins, and as a result of Jaws and other films that scared people, vendetta killing, shark tournaments, and general disregard for the species. Since 1993, these sharks have been protected. This population suffered a serious crash between Mexico and California, where there really is a very small population. These sharks, like many species of large shark, are vulnerable to overfishing because they have late onset of reproduction, around 15 years or so for a white shark, relatively few young, around 4 to 6 for white sharks, and long gestation period, at least a year to 14 months for great white sharks. So it's very easy to overfish a population that takes so long to recover. And that population is still recovering, and it is protected, of course, in California. It's protected in Mexico, and it's become a focus for conservation as well as for ecotourism. Unfortunately, Mexico decided that there was too much ecotourism and some negative impacts associated with that Guadalupe Island. And so they closed their ecotourism indefinitely. We are working with a Mexican nonprofit and trying to work with CONAP, the Fisheries Department, and Semarnat, the Parks Department, to see if they can reopen it in a managed fashion, because tourists do serve as eyes and ears, as well as serving a benefit to the local economy. The Mexican operators who might have been better dive operators are now working elsewhere, and hopefully keeping fishermen out of this UNESCO World Heritage Site at Guadalupe. They, of course, are protected in California and at the Farallon Islands, where there's a small ecotourism effort with Shark Stewards doing topside viewing. One group is still trying to do underwater. It's a challenge, as many of you know. It's much rougher. The water's not as clear as it is, but it's a spectacular ecosystem and marine protected area that has marine mammals, seabirds, humpback whales galore in between, fin whales, blue whales. It's just an extraordinary ecosystem right here outside the Golden Gate that few people get to visit, as well as a marine wildlife refuge that helps protect seabirds and a few endemic species that are terrestrial. So white sharks are sort of on the rebound, and so they're also rebounding from a 5,000-mile or so migration out to the Central Pacific, North Pacific, and we call the White Shark Cafe. They migrate out, leaving around December, January. They're almost entirely gone from our coastline by around May, June. Adults, that is, the ones that are mature, subadults and younger sharks stay near shore, but the big sharks like this female migrate in this extraordinary migration and return every fall, late summer and fall, and peak out around October. And those are the months that we see them the most, we experience the most encounters, and that's what we call Sharktober. So we like to celebrate the sharks, trying to dispel people's fears that these sharks are man eaters or woman eaters or kid eaters. They're seal eaters, like in this case, predominantly elephant seals, but also fur seals, sea lions, sometimes the poor sea otter, and endangered species also under recovery, and other marine mammals, sometimes dead whales. But these large sharks try to fatten up after that long migration and get blubber rich, or eat blubber rich food, that is, so they can put their own layer of fat in their liver and store that energy for the next year's migration as well as reproduction. So this shows an example of the migration off the California coastline and Baja California primarily, also, which has a distinct population unit, although they do have the same genetic profile. They are the same species. There is genetic exchange. We believe that they are reproducing out here in the White Shark Cafe. Sometimes when there's a pregnant female, she takes the Great Circle route, or just separates away from the population if she's pregnant, gestates, comes down to the Southern California Bight, or down into Baja, and sometimes up into the Gulf of California, and they give live birth. So they skip this migration while they're gestating, and then a year later come back and do it again, hopefully. We believe that white sharks can live as long as 70 years now. It's once thought only 25. They may not even become reproductively active until that late. So they are long-lived, and they have a natural history much more like a mammal than they do a fish. This shows the migratory pathway of some of the other sharks at the tagging of Pacific predators. Top at Stanford University has tagged that shows, not in this case, mako sharks that will go north, salmon sharks that go north, the elephant seals, the males will go north from our coastline. So many species have pelagic migrations and then return to the California coastal current where there is upwelling and there's a high food load, or a lot of small fish, which lead to larger fish, which lead to marine mammals. So it's one of the reasons we have such a large abundance of marine life in this highly productive system in the California upwelling current system. So with our Greater Fairlands National Marine Sanctuary, which has expanded to over 5,000 square miles to include the Cordell Bank National Marine Sanctuary, we celebrate the return of the sharks as well as the entire National Marine Sanctuary. Sharktober is also the time that we humans tend to see the large sharks more. The sharks are much more active. The peak human-shark interactions occur in the months of September, October. And that includes generally the peak in fatalities of humans from white sharks, which we actually believe are mistaken identity. John McCosker of the California Academy of Sciences hypothesized that these mistaken identities, that they skylight us. He tested this, as did Peter Klimley and others, looking at seal shapes and other shapes. And these sharks perform what's known as ambush predation. They come from beneath, so they're skylighting their prey, seeing the shape of a surfer, like this diagram shows, that Caroline Harris on this call did for us. Thank you, Carolyn. And this is our Sharktober shark statistic infograph she did for us. Really cute, but also very factual. And so since the California Department of Fish and Game, now Fish and Wildlife, started recording and verifying these human shark encounters or incidents, there have been 209 since 1950. Most of those in California are white sharks. There are a few others that are actually what are termed provoked attack, and those are fishermen either pulling a fish out of the water and getting bit, trying to release a shark, or handling a shark, including mako sharks, occasional thresher shark, or blue shark. But out of all of those incidents, out of 34 species, so including leopard sharks and some of the smaller sharks, there have been very few fatalities. On average, there are about 2 encounters a year, meaning a shark where a shark actually bites a person, or you could call that attack. And most people survive. So about 90% of people in California, anyway, where we have great emergency response, good medical service, a fairly large population near the coasts, unlike other areas like West Africa, South Australia, where it's a very remote area. People can get emergency care. And in fact, just like scuba diving, if you're surfing with a buddy or skin diving with a buddy, you can get care and emergency response and triaged and taken to a hospital and survive and keep swimming with a great story and scars to tell. I'd mentioned the females and their over a year gestation, the giving birth down in the nursery in Southern California, where there is the largest amount of sightings, particularly since with drones and technology. White sharks, young white sharks, eat rays predominantly, other fish. Very rare for a young white shark to bite a human. There was one actually a few years ago off of Gray Whale Cove. A colleague of mine, an open water swimmer, really unusual for a young white shark because typically they go after fish, but in this case he had his head down in a hole looking for a crab and his leg was sticking out. So again, potentially mistaken identity. Fortunately, he was okay, and he's going to tell his story on one of our Sharktober trips to the Farallon Islands starting this Saturday. So those young sharks and young of year stay down in those warmer waters where there's a high density of rays and flatfish in the shallows. A lot of people see them. And until they get up to about 10 to 12 years and become subadults, and they transfer their feeding behavior, and they also have the larger body mass to withstand warmer sea surface temperatures, these sharks move north up into the feeding grounds in Central and Northern California. So we have a few programs. One of them is called Shark Watch, which includes not only white sharks, encounters, sharks in the wild, if you happen to see one, doing photo ID, going into the database, providing those to the top program, shark fins, but also, in this case, 7-gill sharks, in a program started by Mike Baer, and also with the California Academy of Sciences and Monterey Aquarium, where we were tagging these sharks. They have unique spotting patterns, and they end up down in La Jolla Cove. So we were just down there, and some of us aboard the call here, looking for them in almost zero visibility. So it's much more challenging than the clear water conditions. But also human interactions, including fishing, catch and release, catch and kill. So we've got these signs that have been generated and with a QR code and a link tree developed by our students at UC Berkeley. We are trying to receive community science data to look at distribution, the frequency of sightings and encounters, and also as well as looking at shark catch, particularly of white sharks, which is illegal, but also large female 7-gill sharks. And that's a program that anybody can participate in and enjoy and actually learn. We're hoping, to develop an app that's a little bit more gamified with the Fung Institute at UC Berkeley. And on this, with this QR code anyway, you can download some of the shark sheets and learn some shark facts, as well as inter-georeference data on where your sighting was. And if you don't know what it was, we will help identify that species. So it's a great way to learn, and it's a great way to explore. Another one of our programs, of course, is protecting not only the sharks, but where the sharks live. And that's trying to realize these goals set by the United Nations and the Convention on Biological Diversity to protect 30% of our oceans by 2030. We've only got around 3% in truly protected areas. The Sustainable Development Goals established under the United Nations in Aichi, Thailand, was to protect 10%. We have not achieved that yet. Right now, the United Nations is convening, looking at the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly SDG 14, life below water. There's only about 15% of the goals established, which includes sustainable seafood, combating IUU fishing, and other marine protection goals have been achieved. So there's a long way to go, and focusing on protecting marine habitat. We've gained some ground down in Chile in particular. Australia has added new areas. Argentina, Colombia, Panama, after CITES, the Convention of International Trade of Endangered Species, last year protected a significant portion of their marine habitat. So there is momentum, and then it's a big emphasis of shark stewards here in California, starting with our California coastal habitat, but also in our National Marine Sanctuaries, with a new proposed National Marine Sanctuary off the West Coast, as well as one in Hawaii and in the Pacific remote islands. Because this is our mother ocean. It's 71% of the surface of the Earth, 90% of all habitable space. Most species live in the ocean than on the land, and yet we've not done nearly as much as we have on the land in protecting it. So we have a long way to go, but we're working towards that goal, particularly in California, where we've protected 16% of our state waters in this interconnected ecosystem based interconnected marine protected areas, marine reserves, and marine conservation areas, and recreation areas. So I co-chair one of the state committees, the Golden Gate MPA Collaborative. We're working now in education, trying to educate fishermen and the community. You can go online and take our online training and become an ambassador. That's now a statewide MPA ambassador training. It's also going to be used by the district attorneys as an offset for fines, and as much like deer hunters have to take a training, or if you have to go to traffic school. So hopefully we'll be educating people who are unknowingly or knowingly violating our state marine protected areas. We know that these areas are working. We're seeing in some cases 200 to 400% more biomass, more commercial species typically harvested, like sheep's head, that have rebounded in Southern California, spiny lobster. In general, they're working, and they can help make the system more resilient to perturbations like climate change. But we need to do more. 16% is not 30%. With our National Marine Sanctuaries, which are in federal waters, the coast off California, with the Monterey National Marine Sanctuary, with the Cordell Bank, with the Greater Farallones National Marine Sanctuary, and with the Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary, we have a great deal of our federal waters protected, but you still can fish in those waters. Another part of our program is education. So with the Golden Gate NPA Collaborative and now our California Collaborative Network, we are working to to educate the people about the protected areas, as well as helping identify sharks that have been caught, better release packages, trying to avoid catching white sharks deliberately. There was a new law that was just put into place that fishermen can't chum or fish for white sharks when sharks are near. We find there's a loophole in that, and we'd like to see that strengthened. But with Cal State University Long Beach, Dr. Chris Lowe's Shark Lab, working in Southern California, trying to educate fishermen and also trying to communicate the great science that the Shark Lab has been doing in shark movements, and try to offset some of that negative connotation that white sharks in particular have, that sharks are not villains. Unfortunately, in many cases, sharks are the victims. And we can coexist, particularly down south where there's very few human shark encounters with the large sharks anyway. So this is a brochure that we helped develop here off the North Central coast and the Farallon Islands, working with fishermen. Sometimes we see them out in the sanctuary or in actually the state MPA, such as Point Reyes, down off of the Fitzgerald Marine Reserve in San Mateo, Duxbury Reef in Marin County, Bodega Bay, Bodega Head off Sonoma County, and try to educate people that you can't fish in these areas, because these areas are set aside to restore the rest of the ocean where they can fish. Okay, so I didn't mention, but we have a lot of prizes for our Sharktoberfest. And so we have several questions and a grand prize where you can win a free trip to the Farallon Islands this season. So the first question is, what happened to the shark when he got famous? You can put that in the chat. And this drawing is actually out of a kid book that Caroline and I are talking. This is sort of a draft drawing of Sando the Shark in a kid's book that I wrote about 15 years ago, I think. And I wanted to revive it because she did such a great job with our infographs. So I'm going to look at the chat here, but you will get, in this case, I think a beanie, I forget. We'll show you what you win. Okay, if you didn't get it, he became a starfish. And this kind of comes off of our youth education program here in San Francisco, where we are working with underserved youth in the Chinatown area and working in ocean education, but they come down and do marine debris surveys as well as beach cleanups. It's like this one off Aquatic Park. This Saturday is International Coastal Cleanup Day. We're not going to be participating at Aquatic Park because we're going to the Farallons, but we did one for International Cleanup Day last weekend in Kona. But there's a lot of opportunities locally to clean the beach, or you can clean it every month if you look at our website, both in Southern California, here in San Francisco area and Kona, but also go to Surfrider Foundation's website, and you can see a lot of the great activities that are going on. So you can become a starfish. So you can win a Sharks for Kids book that I wrote a couple years ago, and it's a science book. Some of our other campaigns, a lot of what we're trying to do, and this was more of a COVID project because we couldn't work actively in the field, is we have an eBay evaluation. And since CITES, we worked for a few years, but last year in Panama, we were able to get over 100 species of sharks and rays listed under the Convention of International Trade of Endangered Species. That means you have to have a permit. Your country has to have a plan of action, a management plan. You have to demonstrate you're not overfishing the species if you can export them. It makes it difficult for just anybody to sell or trade not only fins, but any of the body parts, including skin, including jaws. So Lexi Addison and I worked on this project with others, doing a project looking at sales on eBay. We came up with hundreds of products being sold without CITES permits, including white sharks, which have been listed for at least 10 years under CITES Appendix 2. Now there are many more species that include makos and blue sharks that you see those jaws on there. And we provided this report to the Federal Fish and Wildlife Department, and eBay. There's a new director of eBay now. We're going to update this and send this again. And if they do not act and force these vendors, who many are unscrupulous, obviously do not have CITES permits if they're selling them internationally, trying to pursue international enforcement under the Convention on International Trade of Endangered Species. And that will limit the trade in some cases. It will limit focusing on endangered species like hammerhead sharks, like white sharks, like silky sharks, like some of the thresher shark species. And you see from this species breakdown, most of the sales are jaws, and many of them are from protected species. And these are being sold if they're being exported illegally. If they're being imported without a permit, they're being purchased and resold in the country illegally for profit. This drive for these body parts, as well as particularly shark fin, has driven shark populations to in many cases, the danger point. Giant hammerheads are critically endangered. Scalloped hammerheads are endangered in many cases, threatened globally. Silky sharks, so many pelagic sharks have lost such a great percentage of their population that they face, in some cases, extirpation or local extinction, but in many cases, outright extinction. We have lost a couple species of carcharodonid sharks in the past couple of years, including the lost shark in Asia. In that area in particular, the Coral Triangle, there's a huge impact and there's very little protection by countries like Malaysia, Indonesia, the largest shark fishing country in the Pacific and exporter, which have very little management or protection and kill their sharks as well as import and export back over to China, the shark fins. Over 1/3 of sharks are threatened with extinction. Sharks are disappearing, and we need to work harder and faster if we're going to protect them. And the way to do that is manifest, but also one is just to recognize how important sharks are to the overall balance and health of ocean ecosystems and the species that they coexist with, whether it be a reef shark on coral reefs or a pelagic shark like a mako shark in a temperate ecosystem. They're DNA architects. They eat the sick, the stupid, and the slow, and they maintain the healthy DNA, making their prey population more robust and also more evolutionarily fit. Sharks also regulate seagrass beds in the case of Australia or in Florida, helping control grazers or manage grazers so that you can actually have a carbon sink, blue carbon fixed. As megafauna, marine megafauna, they also can fix several tons of carbon in the case of a white shark or a whale shark. And when they are allowed to die naturally, that blue carbon will sink down to the bottom and remain fixed and also incorporate itself back into the benthic marine ecosystem in the form of other marine life and maintain that carbon nutrient cycle without it going up into the atmosphere. Sharks have a very complex interaction, and they're not all apex predators like a hammerhead or a white shark. There are many mesopredators like some of the reef sharks. There was a study published last year that showed 20% of the reef sharks are absent entirely from coral reefs that were studied. Reef sharks in particular are easy to kill, and they as mesopredators have a very strong role in fish like groupers, predators that will eat the algivores, the important fish that eat the algae off the coral reef. And so you see this trophic cascade. But the bottom feeders are important as well. The rays, the mudsuckers that oxygenate, that eat the dead or the diseased material that comes down through the water column. So it's important to maintain all marine life in this intactness. And if you really were drawing areas, you'd be drawing right, left, center circles, as well as the other parts of our ecosystem, which include the physical and the chemical. This is just a very elegant study that was done in Sharks Bay with tiger sharks and grazers that shows that these tiger sharks in this case just move manatees, or sorry, dugongs around. Manatees actually in the Western Atlantic, down in Florida and down in Central America, and sea turtles. So by moving them around, they're not clear cutting. These grazers are not clear cutting the seagrass, which actually can can actually incorporate more than 10% of the carbon of many other, for example, flowering plants and trees. They can store thousands of tons of carbons per hectare. And in fact, it's really becoming important to restore these seagrass beds, such as the eelgrass in the San Francisco Bay, because it also provides critical habitat for species that are either larval stages, like Dungeness crab, which is an important commercial fishery, larval salmon, or other invertebrates that serve as prey for other species. So in this case, keeping this apex predator in the system has the benefit of not only maintaining the health of their prey, but also the health of the fundamental of the ecosystem, the seagrass beds. Okay, so hopefully this one's easier. Question 2. So who am I? What is this shark? This is a temperate species. It's one of the sharks that we look for here in the San Francisco Bay, but also down in our Shark Watch program when we dive down in La Jolla Cove. You can put it in the chat if you know what it is. It looks a lot like a blue shark, but it's not. There's a hint at the bottom. Kelly said it's a salmon. No, it's not a salmon shark. It's not a laminate shark. It's actually a hound shark. It's not a white tip. It has a little bit of that sort of fusiform body, but the fin is triangular, very unlike, very good, tope shark, or the unfortunately named soup fin, but appropriately, unfortunately, Galeorhinus galeus, which is a hound shark. It's up to about 5 feet. They are in the San Francisco Bay as an important nursery site. They give live birth here in the San Francisco Bay and other estuarine environments and embayments. They migrate all the way up to British California, down to Mexico. They are a food shark. They're a shark caught for sport. They're a shark that were caught a lot in nets as bycatch. They are highly valued for their fins. And that's why, oh, Kelly Cabal, I think, is the one. These fins were called, or these sharks were called soup fins as opposed to tope or school sharks, which is another common name for them, by the Chinese immigrants that were brought here in the 1800s to work on the railroads, in the gold fields, or work as fishermen off China Camp in Marin County. And they called these the soup fin sharks, because these were the dish of the emperors. In the 1800s or early 1900s, we weren't overfishing sharks. There were plenty of sharks and not that many fishermen. But unfortunately, fast forwarded to the industrial age, there are many more Chinese or Asian consumers, much larger demand, far fewer sharks, and a lot more getting killed by this highly valued and valuable to a fisherman or dried seafood trader as a seafood product. The meat is not as valuable, so this drove this demand for the fins. It's really important to educate our fishermen, but also our consumers in Southeast Asia, which is part of the work that we do in China in some of our media. So there's the answer. And there's Danielle, one of our supporters, and Kelly, you win a Shark Stewards embroidered beanie, which comes in very handy when you're out on a boat, particularly out of San Francisco. One of our other campaigns, with the success of the Driftnet and Bycatch Elimination Act that was passed by the president last year, that bans the drifting, floating nets and gill nets. This is an example of one taken by Team Sharkwater off of Southern California, ensnaring, in this case, a blue shark, killing thousands of sharks, targeting swordfish or other fin fish like white sea bass, but killing seabirds, marine mammals, sea turtles in some cases, whales in other cases. The last gill net fishery left is off of Southern California in federal waters. It's illegal in all state waters. It's the last set net fishery in the USA. It's an extremely antiquated form of fishing, highly unselective, and on its way out as a moribund fishery. And it's much more targeted if you use hook and line. Over half the fishermen in that fleet are using hook and line already. And so with the Pacific Fisheries Management Council, nonprofits like us are advocating the state to support a buyout and phase out of this harmful gear, because it's killing not only these sharks, but also juvenile white sharks, which are protected. And there's a loophole that they can actually sell the bodies and the fins. They cannot export the fins, they can sell them internally. So it's a loophole we need to close. Shark finning was the major threat to sharks when I started Shark Stewards 16 years ago. Shark fishing and bycatch is still one of the largest impacts. At one estimate, it was 100 million sharks were killed a year. It's hard to count them, it's hard to estimate, but we know that shark populations are declining and that fishermen are transferring their fishing from the more common large sharks, because they're becoming less common, like hammerheads and reef sharks, to other species like this bowhead or white speck guitar fish. And these sharks are now threatened and now listed under CITES because they were previously not targeted or occasionally eaten in the tropics, but now they're highly coveted. They call them the king of the shark fins. And so these rays, which are very important for the benthos, especially the seagrass beds in Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Papua New Guinea, Northern Australia, are vanishing in their range because of the fin trade. The fin trade is still a problem internationally and globally. Fortunately, the US has banned the sale and trade. First, we started here and in Hawaii, Washington, Oregon, 14 US states. Now it's illegal to export shark fins from the United States. Canada was first by a couple of years, and the UK, post-Brexit, is joining now the EU. So the Western nations are gathering together, but unfortunately, Asian countries are not, driven largely by these essentially merchants of death, these seafood traders that are making so much money, and uninformed or ignorant consumers that are consuming a dish they associate with wealth and generosity and sometimes health. And in fact, it's none of those, and especially none of those factors for human health, or especially the health of the sharks. So there's a lot we could do abroad or at home. We're expanding our programs into the Gulf of California to create a protected swimway with Pelagica Kakunja, a nonprofit. Also in Indonesia with Source, creating and expanding a protected area that will include shark protection. But here also in California, if you wanted to work in Shark Watch, one of our active campaigns is to support increased habitat restoration and protection of seagrass beds in the San Francisco Bay, and educating the community on the importance of not fishing impacted species of sharks on piers and beaches. We do a lot of outreach with divers and other institutions like Scripps. The Monk Foundation in October will be doing an Ocean Awareness Day this Sharktober. If you're in Southern California, you can help us at the Ocean Health Fair. Right now, there was an event in Morro Bay. The Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary is in the active public review process. There is the link down there in the bottom. I'll put it in also in the chat. You can go to, I don't think I can copy and paste in it, but it's on our website under the sanctuaries. It's on NOAA.gov /Chumash-heritage. We have about 30 days or so left in this public comment period. There are 3 public comment meetings, primarily down the Central Coast, South Central Coast, where this proposed sanctuary is being planned for, off the southern Big Sur, Cambria coast down to Morro Bay, trying to connect also in South San Luis Obispo County and federal waters down to the Channel Islands and the coast of Gaviota. This is the first MPA that's actually a heritage, federally heritage with the tribes. The Northern Chumash Heritage, so the Northern Chumash Tribal Council is involved to protect a lot of their artifacts, their caves and sacred sites down on that southern coastline that they want to see protected. This is a very spiritual place for Native Americans, and they are driving this National Marine Sanctuary really solely under the auspices of heritage, but as well as protecting this important and sensitive area from oil drilling, as well as some of the seamounts that are highly productive and diverse temperate habitats. So if you want to help, you can sign a petition. There's also a link on our page, or attend one of the hearings next week. There will be one September 25th that is a Zoom public hearing. You can take your 3 minutes of fame and try to voice support for this. The public's comment period will be opening soon for the Papahanaumokuakea National Marine Sanctuary, which will be embedded with the Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument, the first Marine National Monument established under the Antiquities Act by G.W. Bush. The second was the Pacific Remote Island Marine Monument, which also has a proposed National Marine Sanctuary, which will be administered by NOAA. It will provide more funding for research, for science, for better management of species, particularly endangered species, marine debris removal. And NOAA is really set up to manage these. They've been doing it for over 100 years in over 15, soon to be 16 national marine sanctuaries in this system. Okay, another quiz question. So what do a shark and a computer have in common? You're not on the Zoom, you don't count. Well, close. We have, yeah, okay. They have bytes, gigabytes, bytes. I think the answer, I think you guys all kind of got it, is megabytes. They have big bytes. Mega is more like million, but so large toothy characters like this beautiful smiley white shark. And yeah, they have megabytes. So we'll send you each of you guys a prize. I found this other kind of funny thing is that we're on our way out to see white sharks, hopefully this weekend in our National Marine Sanctuary. But I came across this saying because a lot of people will contact me and they want us to take them cage diving or scuba diving. We don't do that. We do topside viewing and education here in our sanctuary. We do have research and education dives in other places. You can join us in the tropics next year or in Baja California. But the saying was, it's my life's dream to see a great white shark before I die, just not the instant before I die. So I wish that sentiment to everyone. Maybe not some seals, although we love seals too, but they have to feed our sharks. The other thing we have going this Sharktober is our Run for Sharks. This is our 6th annual Run for Sharks and Ocean Health Fair. So we have several partners, including Cal State Long Beach Shark Lab will be there. Jim Kerpius has a shark exhibit. The National the Back Bay Science Center will be there. We also have shark rescue, simulated shark attack, and you can learn about how to react or respond if someone gets bit. That will be conducted by the Newport or Huntington Beach Life Safety and Lifeguards, including some of the people who saved Maria Corsomeros, who's our Southern California chair, who was bit by a white shark in Newport Beach, and she runs this. She leads this run at the Newport Dunes. So we have a lot of sponsors down below who support this. It's a youth event, it's a walk, it's a run, or it's an education event. And it's a lot of fun if you ever want to make your way down to sunny Southern California. We are planning an Art for Sharks event on board the vessel Empress. We're far behind our goal of selling tickets to this art event and Golden Gate cruise on a vessel. Thanks again to Carolyn, who made this little poster with this shark and his martini down here. You can scan the QR code, please share the event, and the goal is to gather people together, but also to have some of this beautiful art that has been donated, for example, by Cable Cove, by Sean Nelms, by Dana Lamb, and a lot of really beautiful art that will be available for silent auction that will help support our endangered species program and our youth education program. There is hope. I've been working in Hawaii, or we've been working in Hawaii, and we've got a small team there that's growing. We've been doing beach cleanups, working with some schools, other nonprofits, but also getting in the water with oceanic white tips, one of the most endangered sharks globally. This is the focus of Shark Stewards' major conservation program in the next few years, trying to get this species uplisted to CITES Appendix 1, meaning zero kill if we can, zero trade, but also working in these regional fisheries management organizations for zero retention. And gear swap out on the high seas under these fisheries from wire leaders to monofilament, which the state of Hawaii did this year. It's also illegal to catch sharks in the state of Hawaii, both recreationally and commercially. And Hawaii was the first shark fin trade ban, as well as the site of locally managed marine protected areas or community-based subsistence fishing areas that we've been learning about and working with local communities and doing some film work on a film that we're going to produce this year called Kahumano, which is essentially Hawaiian for Shark Stewards. So these signs are now around all of the marinas. There is no fishing for sharks. And this artwork was done by Uncle Herb Kahanui Kane, who actually had great reverence and was a historian, now deceased, but really created sort of a renaissance of some of this Hawaiian imagery, helped catalyze the Hawaiian movement, Hawaiian pride, education for maintaining the language in schools, but also about the association with Mano and some of the mythologies and cultural significance that sharks have to Hawaiians that made it so easy to pass a lot of this legislation because the Hawaiians themselves led it. So we hope to show this as an example that we could do it in other places. The Hawaiians did it. Pacific Islanders have a deep reverence and association with sharks spiritually and culturally, and of course, recognize them as important members of ocean ecosystems. And we'd like to share this triumph and to share this message to the rest of the world through the film Kahumano. Okay, final question for our grand prize. A trip on the Farallon to the Farallon Islands on the Amigo, topside viewing only. I want to show this little video, actually. This was sent to me by a fisherman, actually via a news station this summer. And it's like, what do you think this is? Is this a white shark?
Yeah.
And exactly, yes.
Huge. Oh.
So this is inside the San Francisco Bay. There's the National Marine Sanctuary headquarters right in the background there. It's in the deeper waters of the bay. They do come in. My fellow dolphin swimmers and southeast Southenders are, aware of this when they do the Golden Gate swim or the skate from Alcatraz. There's never been anyone bitten by a great white shark inside the San Francisco Bay, but they do come in, from tagging and also anecdotal observations on a sea lion attack off Alcatraz a few years ago. So just to show you the beginning, that is definitely a large, mature great white shark. It has that dorsal, that caudal notch right there, which is a good indicator. Pretty large distance between the first dorsal. You don't see the second dorsal there, but that is about a 15 or 16 foot shark. And it was probably coming after the fisherman's fish, or that he thought that there was a seal or a sea lion that might have been going after his salmon. So maybe we'll see one of these on our way out of the Golden Gate, if not the island. But we have seen them just outside the gate. Also, the only shark attack near the Golden Gate was in 1959 on a swimmer, a 16 or 17-year-old young man off of Baker Beach. But no human encounters since in the immediate Golden Gate region. A couple bites north in Marin County, nothing off of Ocean Beach, but there have been some bumps on kayaks and one down in San Mateo County 2 years ago on Safra. So what is the most recent estimate of the adult and subadult white shark populations off of our coastline, the central and north central coastline, where we have all of these fat pinnipeds, like off Año Nuevo, like off of Bodega and Point Reyes, and out at the Farallon Islands. So this was a study that was published by Paul Knive, who did his PhD under Barbara Block. Taylor Chappell also was involved with this, and Scott Anderson, who worked, and Tim White, Sal Jorgensen, who worked tagging sharks not only at this coast, but also down off of more San Mateo, looking at the population size, also looking at the movement that showed you, that sign where the map where the Great White Cafe is. They've been looking at this population right out around the Golden Gate and the Farallons. And the number will probably surprise you. Karina got it, 300. You must have read the paper. So that was published in Biological Conservation just last year. We might see them out tagging at the Farallons. They're very active off of also Tomales Point, tagging these large sharks. Not a very large number, and we estimate there's only around 50 adult females, mature adult females. So if you look at a population, that is not very large. And it's easy to fish them out, particularly when we can protect them here in California, but they could still be killed accidentally by sports fishermen or entrained as bycatch in these nets, but especially threatened offshore when they are out in the high seas. Right now, the Convention of United Nations Convention for the Law of the High Seas is under review in New York as part of this UN convention. The United States is not a signatory. We observe most of it, most of the guidelines under the UN clause, but many countries do not, including IUU fishing. About 20% of all fishing is illegal, unregulated, or unreported. And so that includes a lot of the fish that you may be eating in your tuna sandwiches or coming up from a restaurant unknowingly. So there's a lot of work we have to do for managing legal fisheries, but also unregulated or especially illegal shark finning and trade. Because it's very easy, as we saw in the 80s and 90s, to fish out a population where there is a lot of care, awareness, pretty good science, and yet unwittingly almost causing the erasure of this significant species. So we have a lot we can do. Part of it is education, working with the National Marine Sanctuaries, supporting science, and getting out there on the water with us sometimes and learning more and sharing what you learn. So I want to thank you all for helping us save sharks. volunteering, working in education, going online, looking at our petitions, sharing them on social media. Thank you, Carolyn, for your beautiful art. Thank you, Karina and Katja, for all the work that you're doing. Congratulations for all the winners. I'll send me your by email. You all have my email, and you can send me an email with your address, and everybody on here will get a prize for participating and celebrating in our Sharktoberfest celebration. So there's a lot here that you can do. We still got a lot of work to do, and we have a whole nother decade together, at least, I hope, saving sharks. So thank you. I want to thank, of course, our current funders and sponsors. The Earth Island Institute is, we are part of the Earth Island Institute based in Berkeley. And of course, you can share or see our writings, our photographs, and other posts on social media and National Geographic. So happy Sharktober. Thanks again. You have any questions, you can put them in the chat. Also, I'm going to stop sharing. And I want to thank you guys all for participating. Bart, with your daughter Elena, diving with us in the chilly waters. And yeah, hopefully next time, maybe down in Baja, down in the Gulf of California, Cabo Polmo, where it's a lot warmer, maybe go see some bull sharks, or even in Indonesia next year, doing a survey for reef sharks and mantas. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Happy Sharktober. We should make every month Sharktober. And oh, there's a question here Kelly has. How long has white shark tagging been done? Who's doing it? How much data is there? The white shark research started with Scott Anderson and Peter Pyle down off of the out at the Farallon Islands, and then off of Tamales Bay in the 90s, early 90s. I'm sorry, the 80s, yeah. They started observing from the Farallons. They were part of working on as part of the wildlife refuge system, and with what was then called Point Reyes Bird Observatory, doing observations from topside. And they started taking photographs of the fins during predation events, and then also going out on a boat, a small dinghy, and identifying the sharks. Again, like I said, through photography, you can actually match them from their dorsal fins. In fact, I had a slide in a different talk that shows some of the photographs, and each dorsal fin is like a fingerprint. And over time, you can see the sharks, and that's where they got the idea that these sharks are here and then they're gone, that they would disappear. But since we didn't have satellite tags at the time, that technology did not exist, so we didn't know where they went. With the advent of that technology in the 90s, and particularly with Barbara Block and Stanford getting involved, we started to elucidate, also with the Monterey Bay Aquarium, where those sharks were going and returning through those constant data points that were being transmitted. So it's a fairly short-lived program. As I said, Paul Kanivi is doing it again off the Marin and Sonoma coastline and out the Farallones. Barbara Block has been resumed post-COVID down off Año Nuevo, but the Monterey Bay Aquarium basically defunded their entire white shark program during COVID. Sal unfortunately got they let Sal go. He was at Santa Cruz, and I forget where he went now, but he's still active. So it's expensive to tag sharks with satellite tags, and it can be a little invasive. And so we're hoping that we can get data from topside viewing like the original researchers do, as well as, unfortunately, if people catch them and release them by using their photos and putting them through the program that we have. Kelly, you wanted the article also about the link. I'll stick that in the chat because I tried to copy it from my PowerPoint when it was live, but it wouldn't work. But that was, if you look at Kanavi et al. 2021, and I'll put, actually, it's on our website. We talk about the population size of California, sharks in California. The original post-fishing population assessment was done by Taylor Chappell when he was doing his PhD, and I think that was 2011. And the population at that time estimated was around 219 adults and subadults in this population. Now it's up to around 300, so it is on the increase. Not huge, not a huge increase. The subadult population is growing. The young and juveniles are the predominant members in that population down in Southern California. But this population, all told, could be less than 1,200 off of the coastline shared with Mexico. So it's not a lot of animals. And particularly, as I said, when they migrate those tremendous distances, they're crossing hundreds of boats, laying out thousands of baited lines. And so they end up getting killed as bycatch. Of course, it's hard to enforce on the high seas. There aren't that many eyes, ears, enforcers out there. They're in international waters. In many cases, they need to be caught in the act, or they need to be caught with the fins and without the animal aboard. They're easily transported. There's a lot of problems on the high seas, which is why so many large fish populations, not just sharks, bluefin tuna, yellowfin tuna, other big-eye tuna are also getting fished out. It was estimated by Boris Worm that as much as 70% of all large large marine megafauna populations, not counting whales, have been fished out. So we're catching too many, and we're not conserving enough. And like I said, we have a long way to go, but we do have hope. We're doing a much better job in California, in Hawaii, off the West Coast here. There could be a lot better job being done off the East Coast. Makos are completely protected. That fisheries is completely closed, but fishermen are sports fishing them, and they are also advocating to open up under what is called the Shark Act, something that we are advocating for the language to be directed at increasing fishery science, shark science, but not increasing fishing, that is, which is what the fishing lobby would like to see. And that's actually in the House right now. I didn't even mention that, but it's an active bill that we're working with to try to change the language in this bill that was entirely East Coast, driven by the recreational and sports fishing industry, including the tournament industry. There's the link, Kelly. And then there was another question. Is there an inexpensive way to tag a dead, washed out shark so it doesn't count twice by observers? Well, a dead shark's probably not going to get counted twice. Sharks sink, they don't float. So if it's washed out, it doesn't have a swim bladder. It's part of the problem we're seeing in San Francisco in these shark epidemics that we're experiencing. We're only seeing the tip of the iceberg. Most bony fish actually have a swim bladder, so they float when they die. Sharks tend to sink. They're more dense, and their livers are their flotation device, but generally they don't counteract the muscle. There are less expensive ways to tag sharks. That's through what are called spaghetti or catch and mark and recapture tags that have a number, or sometimes an acoustic tag, which sends a signal out. In many cases, you don't have to bring the shark aboard the boat. You can handle it in the water, put the tag on externally, which is what's done with a white shark on the West Coast with like a kind of a harpoon with the satellite tags. But the other way, which is less invasive, is through pattern ID. And observers can actually identify that same shark, and putting it through the eShark algorithm. You're not counting it 10 times. You're counting the same shark, but knowing that it's the same shark. It's not a different shark. So it's you bring up a good point. It's difficult to study sharks. You know, they're not like counting lions on the savannah or birds in a flock, which is still not that easy, but it's hard to count the fish in the sea. Sometimes it's even hard to find them. And a lot of the data and information that we have, in particular fisheries management, is through shark death. We estimate populations by the number of sharks that have been caught. We glean data from shark maturity, from measuring or looking at dead pregnant sharks. And so unfortunately, it's a way to gather data, but it doesn't help the shark that's dead. And so hopefully with new technologies and advanced technologies, some that are actually being in development or have been developed by the military, but aren't being applied just because of the sheer cost or top secret, we can see into the deeper depths of the water. We can actually identify individuals. There is that technology in many cases, but that is not readily available to scientists who have to write grants. Or like us advocates who rely on you guys to just take a picture and submit it so we could put it in our algorithm for free. So yeah, great questions, great interactions. Thank you all. Watch our website. We really do. Carmen Pasos is on here. Sorry, Carmen, I use your maiden name. We're just finalizing a project down in the Sea of Cortez, and we hope to hopefully lead a trip of community scientists down to either Cabo Polmo, where Carmen did her master's, and she's also working on a 7-gill socioeconomic study in La Jolla. She did her master's down in Cabo Polmo, and we want to tell that story a little bit in a film as well, but also maybe off of La Paz. So we have goals to support the community science, but also support the local communities so that they can continue to generate income so that they don't have to catch sharks. They can make money just by showing tourists that sharks are more valuable alive than dead.
Yeah,
so
that's
thanks
right.
everybody for listening. Thanks, Carmen. Good to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Thank you.
And if you want to learn more, you can go onto our YouTube channel, Shark Stewards. We recorded the last talk that we did just on 7-gill sharks and shark population before our dive with Waterhorse Charters down in La Jolla Cove. So if you want to join us next year, please check out Waterhorse Charters or our website, sharkstewards.org, and maybe you can see a 7-gill shark or a tope shark.